So guys, we finally reached that dreaded point. It was just announced that Jujutsu Kaisen has 5 chapters left before it ends. We all knew it was eventually coming with how much Cxdy has been talking about it, both this year and last year making statements of wanting to end it soon. Still, many of us thought that the series had a little more left in the tank, as there were quite some stuff that are still left unanswered. And there was even the potential of the merger still happening, which could have taken around 10 to 15 chapters to deal with, but that's all off the table now. With the editor's note of last chapter revealing that the next chapter will be the climax of the Sukuna fight, I started seeing quite some discourse around how the Hakari vs Uraume fight was done dirty, and I want to discuss that for a bit. Now, when it comes to defeating Sukuna, it was made very clear that 1. Simply defeating him would not be enough, and that 2. The team could not fully throw everything they had at him. These 2 things are because Sukuna had allies in Kenjaku and Uraume. They could essentially interfere at any point in and or after the fight, which meant that taking them down at the same time as Sukuna was essential for the plan to work. Furthermore, while making the plans, Kusakabe even highlights that Kenjaku has the higher threat potential between the 2, since Kenjaku could potentially end the world as we know it with the merger, whereas Sukuna is relatively tame if left unprovoked. Midway through the battle, this changed though, but with the merger not happening anyway, this point no longer matters much. Regardless, the team had to decide on how to meticulously allocate their resources in a way that allowed for the highest chance of winning. Takaba, Todo, and Yuta got sent to Kenjaku, Hakari got sent to Uraume, and the rest were on Sukuna duty. As the chapters went on, we saw the start of it all with Gojo vs Sukuna, the follow-up scrambles, the fight of how Kenjaku met his end, some small segments of Hakari vs Uraume in between, and then the final stretch versus Sukuna. See, it's not strange to think that Hakari vs Uraume was done dirty. After all, Hakari alongside Todo, Yuji, and Yuta was built up by Gojo to the audience to be among the students which he thinks won't be limited to special grade in the future. Furthermore, throughout the story, we get a couple of parallels here and there on how Hakari should be on a similar tier of power and dependability to the likes of Yuta himself. Now remember, Yuta is a special grade sorcerer who even had his own story where he was able to defeat Suguru Geto, longtime friend and rival to Gojo. With all these comparisons, many even started to speculate that Hakari is worthy of the title of special grade, but that he was gatekept from it either because of his unorthodox curse technique or because the higher ups didn't want to acknowledge his strength. Regarding Uraume, we were also left in the dark as to whether or not they were a special grade sorcerer, because on one hand, all of the actual special grades sort of disregard her strength and threat level. She finds piercing blood to be quite a fast move, while Kenjaku thinks that it's alright. And lastly, it was never even stated by the narrator or by Kenjaku that Uraume is a special grade level sorcerer. On the other hand, Hakari has been equated to Yuta and Maki, who are both special grade sorcerer and special grade level non-sorcerer respectively. And Hakari and Uraume seem to be on equal footing. Uraume was also able to completely freeze every grade 1 near them at the end of the Shibuya incident, though most were tired or already injured. Furthermore, it would seem strange if Sukuna let a weakling hang around him. This fight would have then basically been the perfect moment to establish whether or not both were special grades. This would then also allow for a bit more proper scaling for characters like Ryu Ishigori and Uro Takako, who seem powerful, but not as powerful as an actual recognized special grade like Yuta. Hakari having left school a couple months prior to the main story starting meant that both he and his partner in crime Kirara weren't around for the Goodwill event, and thus missed out on an opportunity for a backstory. Their introductions being midway in the story meant that Cxdy either had to choose for a strong characterization or backstory. This would then leave opportunity for the other option at a later point in the story, like done with Nobara for example. This was yet another reason why some people were really looking forward to seeing a fight between Hakari and Uraume, as it could have further dived into both characters' backstories and how that shapes their current outlook. In fact, we were already starting to see this a bit with Uraume, and then it was just never touched upon again. The final reason that people were looking forward to this fight specifically is because both throughout the promotional material and from Kenjaku's mouth, Hakari was considered to be among the team's heavy hitters. And considering that each of the heavy hitters got their own fleshed out fights and moments during the raid, people naturally expected the same for Hakari. So, as we discussed before, Jujutsu Kaisen has 5 chapters left, of which we know for sure that the next chapter will be the climax for Sukuna. So where do we go from here? Well, originally I thought that the main reason that this fight was being done off screen was that so that we would eventually be led to have forgotten about Uraume, only for her to end up saving Sukuna in a clutch or sacrificial moment. Because you know, why else do the fight off screen? But now I realize that the fight has been off screen so that the victory on Sukuna and Uraume can be simultaneous, thus allowing the series to wrap up quicker, leaving Gege with less work. And you might be wondering how, because as far as we know, Uraume and Hakari are and have been essentially perfect counters for each other. Uraume being a ranged fighter means that Hakari can barely get any attacks off, and Hakari can constantly regenerate any damage that he takes from the freezing in Jackpot. Well, the answer is quite simple. Maki is still alive and so is Kirara. They're both still in fighting condition, yet aren't at Sukuna's location currently. So naturally, I think that them joining Hakari is what's going to shift the tide of this battle with Uraume, allowing them to win. I think at some point Maki will have realized that either Hakari and Jackpot is a decent counter for Sukuna's slashes, or that Maki realizes that his fight is taking too long. This would make her sneak off and go help him. The same could be said for Kirara. Kirara's technique could be especially useful for stopping the ranged ice attacks. Even if Sukuna via Megami's memories already told Uraume the secret behind Love Rendezvous, it would still be quite tedious to deal with as Kirara can switch the position of targets at will too. Now, some of you might be wondering how Maki is still alive. Remember that Todo was able to teleport everyone out of Sukuna's domain. However, Maki has 0 cursed energy, so Boogie Woogie shouldn't have been able to recognize her. However, the important factor here is that Maki was close to the edge of the domain. The reason why Todo couldn't reach Yuji and Choso was because they were too close to the center and thus weren't in range. If Miwa, who was next to Maki, was in range, then it automatically means that Maki should have been close enough to the edge where she would have had enough time to run out of the domain between the pausing of the slashes and the explosion from the fire arrow. Hence why Todo is unsure if everyone is okay, but does make sure to say that they are most likely fine. So yeah, ultimately I don't think that there's many other ways that this can end up going with just 5 chapters left. There's also the possibility that no one ends up helping Hakari and he just wins on his own, but that would just be rubbing salt in the wound, seeing as we wouldn't have even gotten to see how he would have gotten to that point of winning. Combined with it at that point just feeling like an afterthought. Although I myself am not particularly a Hakari fan, I can empathize with those who are. It's an incredibly sour situation where this fight's last appearance was in the final 3 pages of chapter 252, and its next appearance will be after the climax of chapter 267. That's 17 chapters that the fight was essentially skipped. And what's even crazier is that up until now, this fight has only had a combined 17 pages of content. 2 pages of chapter 237, a single panel in chapter 238, 11 pages of chapter 245, and the aforementioned 3 final pages of chapter 252, which just for reference is currently shorter than the 2 chapters that Kashimo got versus Sukuna. Again, the fight isn't over yet, but it's definitely a sour situation which could have easily been avoided by just adding more chapters instead of trying to wrap it up so quickly. But yeah, what do you guys think? Was this fight done dirty? Is it too late to wrap up the fight satisfyingly in the last 5 chapters? And how could Gege have handled it differently and still keep the same narrative and end results? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, your support is always much appreciated. See ya!